So thanks, Mal. Can everyone hear me? Please, if you can't, just tell me throughout. So as customary, I would like to thank Mal and Helen and the team for bringing me here. It's been a real interesting. I've been here less than 24 hours. It's customary when I visit a town, obviously say complimentary things about the town and patronise all the locals with they're the most important place on the planet, right? That's particularly hard when I go to Canberra, but I must say, coming here, I've been genuinely surprised at what I saw in the last 24 hours, both in terms of the city itself, the beautiful historic city, which I didn't expect. I should be better educated, I know. But also the people and the attitudes that I've seen, the way that the city integrates with the university, with business on a technology park, and also the way in which the teams actually work. I had the pleasure of going around various sites yesterday and just seeing the innovative and creative work that the teams are doing for exploits all over Australia. But not just what they're doing, but how they're doing it. The new models of working and teaming and supporting clients that honestly I hadn't expected. So it's not hard for me to say complimentary things. I saw some amazing and surprising things in Ballarat yesterday that I'll be taking to the rest of my business. So as Mal said, I've got a horrible job title that means not a lot, but what I tell people I do is through the work of my team. So I think we're seeing a historic shift in our industry and in society driven by technology. And if you open the papers in Australia today, you'll read about, good or bad, read about the national broadband network and how that's going to transform society. You'll read about the natural resources, oil and gas expansion in the west and in the north. And you'll read about online commerce and how all of our lives are changing through changes in retail and that transformation. And I guess that's what my teams do. My teams are rolling out systems behind the NBN. We're rolling out the systems behind 3 of the major gas fields, Wheatstone, Gorgon and Inpex. And also behind a lot of the digital transformation, as you'll see online with Maya, Coles, David Jones, etc. So that's what I enjoy, and I was pleased to see how Ballarat's driving a lot of that yesterday. So a bit of a background. My background is as a technologist. I got into technology. A lot of people get into technology to fix things because they've got an interest in making things work. I guess I had an interest in breaking things, in understanding how technology would transform and change business models and disrupt things. And that's been the story of my career from early days in military research, artificial intelligence and getting aircraft to think like pilots, all the way through working in software companies. It's all about disruption and change. And my main interest is actually when technology becomes boring. So my view is when technology is interesting and the guys in the labs in the white coats can get excited about it, but when it gets boring, when you get mass adoption, when it's simple to use, that's when it changes business and when it changes and transforms our society. And I think there's never been a more relevant time to live if you're like me and interested in that kind of boring technology and how it makes exciting things happen. So I'll just start with a few examples of how I see that happening today. YouTube is just one example of online technology. It'd be easy to view YouTube as just a way of viewing television programs or whatever it may be, just viewing and consuming video. What's interesting to me is how, particularly Gen Y, but a lot of people have gone on board YouTube and actually seen it as a creative platform. They've said, I can create and share and build a community around something I'm interested in, something I believe I'm an expert in. And YouTube for me has been a transformational technology. Very boring, very simple to use. But I see how even my kids, I've got a couple of graduates who work for me and an intern, and they're considered experts. The intern's considered an expert in, she's got tens, hundreds of thousands of followers in how to apply makeup. A passion of hers, but people all around the world are fascinated by it, so much so that businesses look to sponsor her and get placements of their makeup in her videos. Another one of my graduates is an expert in filmmaking. He's had an interest for years, and he collaborates with the community and actually uses YouTube as a platform. And I talked about boring technology. It's actually quite a boring platform. It's easy to use. The same as Facebook, the same as Twitter. Very boring and simple, but transformative in how they're changing our society, I believe. Another good example would be, anyone see this robo hand? This hit the news in the last couple of weeks, and that this is very exciting in the way that 3D printing technologies, again, becoming boring, becoming commoditized, and it will change our society. So you see, the story here is that this boy unfortunately was born without a hand fully formed due to oxygen starvation in the womb. His father, for years, tried to push the medical community to fit him with an artificial limb. This is in the US, so whether it's through access to the right facilities and funding, was not supported. Doing his own research online, connected with a whole network of people who were into 3D printing, and for less than $100 was able to print a hand for his son. Got access to a 3D printer through this community, got the patterns and collaborated with the community to create the patterns for a 3D hand, all with the necessary robotics for less than $100. So that's where boring technology becomes, in my view, like hugely exciting, and I think 3D printing is just going to explode in that way. Anyone recognise this? Anyone wearing one of these? A Fitbit? No? Good. A Fitbit. So this is just a band you wear on your wrist. It's, again, transforming some people's lives and the way they live and the way they monitor their health. So this is just a bangle you can wear. It tells you how many steps you take a day, what your exercise patterns are. This one happens to also monitor how you sleep and can tell you how you sleep. I think this is just the real first step in a journey around what people call the instrumented self, or the quantified self. People measuring and monitoring their own bodies and lives and measuring every bit of it. But you can imagine a scenario here where if I'm not sleeping well and that continues and I've got a history, say, of mental health problems, this device can actually notify my medical practitioner that my sleep patterns are disrupted, and they can take interventive steps. There's no reason other devices you will see in the environment can monitor my blood pressure, my heart rate, and all manner of symptoms. This will transform, I believe, these kind of devices transform the healthcare industry. Again, very boring technology. That costs anywhere between $60 and $120 to buy that device, but the impact could be huge. This last example, anyone know what this is called? Anyone seen this around does this happen around Ballarat? It does. Right, good. So this is variously called either yarn bombing, yarn storming. I call it guerrilla knitting. You can't get more boring technology than knitting, right? Been around for centuries. But people have suddenly, and this literally, if you look at the root cause, it's probably started around 2005. People have suddenly decided this boring technology, we can do different things with it, and people are transforming urban landscapes. Might be power poles or all the ugly infrastructure we have around the city using knitting. And it's a good example to me that technology does not, this is not a technology obviously, but it doesn't have to be, innovative and sexy in and of itself. It's the application of it that creates new possibilities. People are using yarn bombing, yes, to decorate the environment. There are actually whole political movements popping up. There's actually a political knitting movement, believe it or not, that's putting these all around cities. So hopefully that gives you some good examples of what I mean by boring technology being transformative. Which brings us to the topic at hand, this whole digital wave, this digital innovation that we're seeing in our society at the minute. So most of you would have seen charts like this before. Most of us have probably lived through some of these waves. If you look at from tabulating systems that count and add, to programmable systems that you can actually program and create things. We're now seeing a new wave of what we're calling cognitive systems that can think and learn and respond. So one good example of that would be, anyone heard of IBM Watson? So Watson is a system that we created that is most famous for taking on the Jeopardy champions. Jeopardy is a game show in the US. Took on all the champions of that show and managed to beat them. And really, this is a trial of cognitive computing. By cognitive computing, we mean there's a lot of noise around big data. You'll have heard big data. How can we analyze vast volumes of data in real time to glean insights? And yes, that's one aspect of Watson. But secondly, the fact that it can learn, it can take structured, unstructured data and actually learn new things and qualify what it learns based on the quality and source of that information. So it knows, well, is that really a good source on the internet or not? And it can qualify that. And the third thing that it can do is process natural language. It understands all the ambiguities embedded in our language. So it doesn't take a literal interpretation of a question or a challenge. So I think we're seeing a whole new, again, like the RoboHand example, this is just the first step in what will be an explosion of cognitive computing systems. Since IBM's obviously driven some of these waves that you've seen at the bottom of innovation, whether it was the introduction of the mainframe, the invention of the PC, they had transformative impacts on industry, and most of us saw them on business. I think what we're seeing now is unprecedented in terms of the impact on society. We're actually seeing technology for the first time have a major disruptive influence. So you'll see with particularly social, mobile analytics and cloud, we're seeing how that's impacting our everyday lives. I've personally never lived through, we've seen these single waves of innovation, the mainframe, the PC, the internet. Now we're seeing 4 waves at least happening at once. I believe this is unprecedented. It's unprecedented in terms of impact, unprecedented in terms of reach, and the fact that this is changing us as individuals. It's a consumer impact as much as a business impact. And the challenge that I see in dealing with my clients is almost this wave is not a wave of technology, it's a wave of societal change that they've got to respond to. How does a bank deal with their consumers? How does a retailer deal with the challenge of, well, I can't just open a store now, I've got to go online or go mobile. And they're dealing with different ways that we all behave, and we're forcing business to change. We've never seen that kind of change, in my view, in society. Some examples, I won't read them all out, but some amazing things here. You see Africa top right, 18% of Africa's GDP will be transacted through mobiles by 2015. So for Africa, the mobile is their internet. They've never seen the internet. They won't have had desktops largely, I'm talking generally, right? So the mobile represents that first wave of both the internet and computing for most Africans. And it's also their bank. It'll be 18% of GDP, as I say. 1 out of every 7 minutes is spent online on Facebook. It's increasingly the way that we interact with each other and build communities, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I see new ways of interacting and new relationships forged that wouldn't happen walking down the high street in Ballarat. 80% of new applications are built on the cloud. 1/3 of consumer data is stored in the cloud by 2016. So the level of change is huge. We were talking before about tourism in Ballarat, right? Tim, sorry? Yeah, Tim. I was talking to Tim about how tourism has changed here, and I'm going to get these stats wrong, but he mentioned that just in terms of mobile access to tourism information in Ballarat, it was going from the low 20s to the 40%, 47 within a year. But so within a year, you see how consumers have changed. They're visiting Ballarat and they want to work with the city in a different way to access the information and services they need. So this change is fundamental to every industry that I work with. And here's what we believe consumers expect: instant access to information. They want to be engaged as an individual, not as a segment, segmented in terms, I'm an individual, I've got specific needs, you need to understand me if you want to work with me. They want transparent and open relationships, and in return, they understand there's a mutual benefit. If you know more about me, I'll give up some of my privacy, but I expect a targeted offer in return. I expect better customer service in return. And they want a seamless experience, whether it's across online, in-store, call centre, through kiosks when you check in with Qantas, as I saw here yesterday. So consumers are changing. The question is, can businesses respond to this kind of change and understand the consumer? Similarly, in terms of the vast volume of data that we see in Australia today and globally. So in just 2 days, we generate as much data in 2 days today as we did in the whole of 2003. The volumes are just incredible. 1 billion tweets are sent every 3 days. 5 million trade events are clocked every day. What does that mean? It means we've got a hell of a lot of data and not many insights. How do we turn that information into insights in real time to glean intelligent information that we can help our customers with and help operate our businesses? I'm sure many of you last week bet on the Melbourne Cup. Who had a punt on the Melbourne Cup? Only 2 of you. That's a bit. What's happening? that's un-Australian. That's un-Australian, surely. So I'm sure you all did, right? So on the Melbourne Cup, and it's interesting. The Melbourne Cup is another example of this digital change. I don't know if you realise, 50% of all horse racing bets are placed within Spring Carnival. 50% of those are placed on that one day. So 25% of my revenue, if I'm a bookie, is on that one day. So if I can get better access to information on that day, I can use the data, vast volumes of data coming in, glean insights from that. I can spot fraudulent transactions. Not only spot them and then chase them up later, I can spot them and prevent them happening if I can spot the patterns in real time. Similarly, if I can spot that my missus won a bundle because she picked a horse based on colours, I did all my own analytics and got no. She picked a horse based on colours. Well, it could target those patterns and say, hey, there's a runner in the next race, the same colours. How about you put your winnings on that? But bookies in this country are not able to get that level of insight. They get all this data flooding in, and they can't leverage it. So similarly to Tim's example, I met with the CIO of Tabcorp. I've known Tabcorp for many years, and Kim Wen's the CIO, and Kim tells me they rushed to get online because they realised their bricks and mortar store business was challenged by online. So they rushed to get online, and then lo and behold, 2 spring carnivals ago, they had about 2% of all their transactions on mobile. This spring carnival, there'll be 70 to 80% of transactions on mobile. People are still going in store, but already the online channel's becoming irrelevant. Every bookie rushed there, but society's changing to such a degree where they want the experience of going in the store or putting bets on in a smoky pub, or they'll do it wherever they are, whenever they want. They don't want to sit at a desk at home putting bets. That industry is going through major transformational change. How do they use that data to respond to that change? So this means that consumers expect anytime, anywhere, access to transactions. They expect to be part and almost be developers in a business and influence how that business operates. We're seeing people want to create, as they did on the YouTube platform, and actually contribute to changing businesses. They don't want to be a consumer anymore. They actually want to tell businesses, I want this product, I want these services. We wanted to make sure that businesses actually understood this trend, so we've done a bit of research. Every year we interview, this year it's about 4,300 C-level execs globally in 70 countries. With in about 20 different industries to understand, do they get this phenomena? And what we found was, look, they do. So this year, for only the second year running, CEOs, these are not the CIOs or CTOs, CEOs cited technology factors as the major influencer of their business success. So technology, this is a CEO. In previous years, as you saw, going back to 2004, it might be macroeconomics, market factors. It might be skills they got access to or regulatory concerns. They were all the major drivers for business success. The last 2 years, it's been technology. That's the CEO talking. However, when we asked the CEOs, how prepared are you for this? We asked them around analytics and big data. In 2011, 61% of them said they just weren't ready for big data and analytics. They weren't prepared, 61%. When we asked them this year, are you prepared for big data analytics? 71% said they weren't. So it's trending completely the wrong way. And my view is they're probably better informed now. They know now what they didn't know then. They know the gap, the delta between where they need to be and where they are. So that gap is a significant challenge to business success. We saw similar trends across social and mobile as well in terms of that gap, in terms of their understanding and their capability. If you look across C-levels, we saw a similar trend, CMOs, CIOs, etc., in terms of what they believe is fundamental success. And interestingly, the technologists, the CIOs, they still believe market factors, etc., are the major influencer. And when you look right across, there's quite a disconnect between C-levels. Now, you'd say if you were running a business and you had a fundamental disagreement on the influences for success, you'd be troubled, right? If your C-level execs can't agree, there's a problem. What we actually found is outperforming businesses, those with better performance in terms of growth and profit, actually had a diverse C-level, a diverse board who could bring those perspectives together. As long as you've got a C group that can collaborate, you need these different perspectives. And the fact that the CIO is citing market and the CEO is citing technology demonstrates that a leading business can collaborate and understand each other's perspective. Now, if I move on quickly, this comes at a time, this transformation, this change comes at a time when Australia's productivity growth is struggling. Whereas we saw productivity in the 80s at 1.7% growth, we're now at 0.6 by the 90s and ongoing. Competitiveness, the World Economic Forum, we're at 7th in 2000, we're now 20th. This is a significant challenge. Just when we're seeing all this change, we're also less competitive in the economy. We need to get back to 2% plus productivity growth, respond to this digital change, compete internationally. So what IBM has done is commission a piece of research. There's a lot of rhetoric, as you've just heard from me, about, well, the world's changing, you better respond. We actually wanted to quantify that. We engaged the National Institute for Economics and Industry Research, Dr. Peter Brain. So Dr. Brain predicted to an extent the global financial crisis, the Asian crisis, predicted the early 90s recession in Australia. So we engaged him to model what would a business look like by 2025 in terms of economic performance if they invest in digital innovation. And the results were quite startling in terms of that response by 2025. He told us what I just talked about is true. Customers will become more connected. They'll demand more. A customer is actually an employee. They expect you to behave, businesses to behave in the same way as systems they use in their social lives. Organisations must get flatter and more agile and also collaborate with an ecosystem of partners. They haven't got all the answers within their own enterprise, and they need to use insights from their data to respond to change. So this is a response based upon all the research we did, interviewing, again, C-levels in Australia and looking at the economic data. Key findings were what we call the compounding influence. If you invest in digital now, if businesses even take small steps now, you'll get such a competitive advantage that you'll open up a significant gap on your competition. By 2025, some businesses will be unsustainable if you haven't invested and your competitors have. We found public sector in particular is a huge opportunity for improved services. I think that's probably because the bar's so low today in terms of investment in digital and the way citizens expect to work with government. There's a real opportunity there in Australia. You'll see some numbers coming up. And the need to reskill our workforce. Part of our productivity challenge is the ageing workforce and how we involve them in this digital change. So I did want to go through some numbers. I mentioned we had some financial data to back this up. So by 2025, the question we asked was, two peer organisations today, if one was to invest in digital, I apologise for the eye strain, but we'd get access to the charts after. If two were to invest in digital, one was to invest, sorry, and one was not. By 2025, what would be the gap? So you see, in terms of gross profits, this is just in the telco space. A telco that invests in digital will move from $4 billion to $18.5 billion in profit. Sorry, $1 million in profit. $1 billion in profit. If we look at the follower will have moved from only 1.9 to 8 billion. So that's a significant competitive gap in terms of profit. In terms of market capitalisation, the leader who invests will be worth double their peer today. This is only by 2025. So the kindergarten kids of today will just be graduating. That's the period we're talking, relatively short. In terms of revenue per customer, so the ARPU, as telcos call it, and this is their key measure for performance, will go from to $6,000 per customer versus $3,300. So if you're a telco and you don't invest, that's a serious competitive challenge. Do you agree? Then these are numbers, I guess, to back up that rhetoric. Obviously, the NBN is driving a lot of this change locally. We see now the NBN is providing a level playing field. It's not about being network-centric anymore if you're a telco. So Telstra have dominated the industry because they've had a network to build around. Now, if I was a retailer, for example, I would be thinking, I can become a telco. I've got access to consumers. All I need to do is open up a sales and marketing organisation, and I can be a telco. I've got a level playing field to access the NBN. This is going to shake up our industry, shake up the whole business model. Telstra have got to reinvent themselves and think, well, we're not about having the best network. We've now got to be the best at selling, marketing and servicing customers. Otherwise, they can go anywhere else and get exactly the same service. So there's a fundamental change happening in telco over the next 12 years that opens up that competitive advantage. If we look at retail, it's even more startling. So this trend has already started, obviously. We've seen Myer, Coles, David Jones launch new e-commerce capabilities and mobile capabilities. two peer organisations today with 25 billion in sales, so exact peers today, you'll see the one that invests has 124 billion in sales by 2025, whereas the follower will have actually fallen off to 17 billion. Now that gap, 124 to 17, is not just a competitive challenge. I think that's a survival threat. If I'm a retailer who doesn't get it, who can't create a customer experience and understand how digital and mobile, online all integrate with the in-store experience, I won't survive to 2025. I'll be taken over or will go bust is the hypothesis from the research. So this is why you're seeing a lot of innovation happening in retail at the moment to create new services and embrace consumers. David Jones are a good example of this. This information comes from their published results, their financial reports since they launched online. Interestingly, David Jones first went online in 2000, 2001. They realised that putting a nice website up would actually lose them money, because every time someone ordered something, they had to scramble through warehouses to actually find the item. Their supply chain did not support online. They've replaced all their warehouse management, their order management, their call centre systems, yes, and online and mobile. They've pretty much gutted their business to respond to this consumer trend, and the results are clear. So triple-digit growth, quarter on quarter, they're the results of online sales growth. Yes, it was on a low baseline, but still, it's based on 10 or 12 years of the old capability, and now this is where they're at today. Online, interestingly, the order size is 3 times larger. If you spend $50 in store, you'll spend 150 online. It's just easier to consume, easier to use. If you order the pants, it automatically recommends the jacket. The order sizes are increasing, and consumers are clearly responding to that. Interestingly, 33% in their case of orders are coming from mobile and tablet. So this is real, and we're actually seeing a world where now mobile will be the first channel that you need to implement, and online, desktop, web will be the second. I'm going to move through these pretty quickly, but public administration. So obviously, there's not a competitive landscape for the ATO or defence, right? They don't compete within Australia. So we asked them to look at 2 scenarios. One where these agencies invest in accelerated growth, and one where they maintain their current operating model. There are some 730,000 employees today in the core government services in Australia, with a spend of about $71 billion. Now, if the current trends continued by 2025, that spend will have doubled. Completely not sustainable spend on government services in Australia. You'll see in terms of GDP, we're about 4.8% currently of our GDP on government service spend. What we found was by 2025, if you've got accelerated investment in digital, we believe that'll be around 3.9 versus 5.1. Doesn't sound like a big gap. That's about $40 billion. So if government doesn't move to this model, to a greater digital innovation, we believe we won't have sustainable government services by 2025. Does that make sense? Yeah. And the ATO is one good example. I must say, before I engaged with the ATO, I didn't expect an innovative, exciting, dynamic engagement, but I was quickly, my view was quickly changed of that preconception. So the ATO have realised this change is coming, that we're all going to be transacting digitally. We're going to check out with our phones and just swipe and go, and that tax is increasingly going to have to struggle to keep up with the flow of data that flows through the economy. If they can capture every transaction, and you can at checkout say, well, actually, that's for my home office, that's work-related, there's a tax deduction that can flow through in real time, then they can underpin all of our economy, our payments, our tax and superannuation digitally. So they're creating this capability that we're implementing, and in fact, the local team in Ballarat are key to support 2.2 million businesses in Australia, 21,000 tax agents and 200 plus software vendors, all collaborating in a huge ecosystem to support Australia's tax and superannuation. What's innovative is not only the fact that the tax office are creating this and will then push it out to whole of government, but the fact that they understand the need, that they have to collaborate. You look at all those businesses, they're taking a consultative approach to business. They're creating sandpit development environments so that these software vendors can get on board, the MyObs, the Quickens, and actually collaborate on this initiative to change our economy, in essence. So pretty fundamental. If you can imagine by 2025 us all transacting this way and having real-time tax returns. I know that appalls many of us, but tax is a reality. Lastly, financial services. I won't take you through the numbers, they're all there, but similarly, this gap will open up between leaders and followers. If they don't invest, the numbers are there. We'll give you access to the report. I don't understand it, I'm not an economist, but there's the formula there based on previous performance and trends we see in the market. There's a formulaic approach to these stats that clearly show businesses must invest. The banks get this. So if you read the newspapers, you'll have seen it. Ian Narev is the CEO of Commonwealth Bank. He's been in the press lately attributing their record profits last quarter. He attributed their profit to their superior performance in technology. The fact that they spent $1 billion on SAP core banking. It's the only bank that can access the back end in real time. I don't know if you realise when you go to an ATM with all the other banks, that transaction's held and batched up and processed overnight to the back end. Commonwealth Bank now can, in real time, access their back end. They're a real-time bank. They can push new products out, get new insights out from that core. Every channel integrates to one source of truth. And he attributed their strong performance to this technology change. He also was asked, do you lie awake at night worrying about the competition? Do you lose sleep? And he admitted that he did. He absolutely loses sleep over the competition. But it's not the logos that you see there. He said he loses sleep over Google, Samsung, Apple, which seems odd, right? But he understands that those organizations know how to embrace a consumer. They know how a consumer thinks and what they demand in a digital world. And all they need to do is put in a bank back end and they've got the consumer. If Facebook were to launch a bank, you can imagine the consumer engagement they would get. So certainly leading innovators absolutely get this. You've seen all the other banks move. ANZ are moving. I mentioned Watson. ANZ are using Watson for customer service. So now instead of going in and saying, what interest rate can I get? The query that you can't see there is, how much will it cost to send my daughter to college? Literally a simple query as that. Watson can answer it. It knows the modelling. It knows how old my daughter is without me telling it. That can then model from data that's in the public domain what the likely course fees are going to be in the year that she goes to college, and it will give you responses based upon all the insights it's gleaned from various data sources. And it tells you the strength of them. It'll give you various answers depending on how trusted the sources of information are. That's how these digital technologies and cognitive systems are transforming our industry. I am conscious of time, so I apologise, Mal. I'll quickly move on. I guess the point we wanted to make here is there's a lot of focus, when we talk about digital, a lot of focus on this front office. Hey, I'll get a new mobile app, a new website, but without changing the back end, without being able to respond to that. If you're a retailer and you can take an order, great. But if the goods aren't in stock, or if they're in stock but you can't ship them to market within the time frame you specified, you've lost that consumer. So what we're seeing is leading digital enterprises investing in what we're calling the globally integrated enterprise. Automated, efficient, integrated back-end systems that can respond to this digital change. Now, we talk about these new capabilities, mobile, social, analytics, cloud, etc. It's not just what we're delivering to consumers, but how we're delivering it. We need continual innovation. They expect new features and capability every day, every week. So cloud is absolutely driving that. So it's not just what the industry is delivering, it's how we're delivering it. Cloud means instant capability. It lowers the bar to entry. Anyone can innovate in the cloud. They don't have to buy hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of infrastructure. There are cloud native capabilities you can tap into today. Mobile was born in the cloud, right? 50% of the applications that you've got on your phone are likely to be based on IBM's soft layer cloud, which dominates the mobile apps market. For example, 50% of the apps. On the other hand, the systems you've had for years need to be cloud enabled to respond to this change. We built them for resilience and no change. They're kind of these stable silos that we've ring fenced. They actually need to change and be agile now, which is a challenge for most businesses. So the cloud can support that kind of change. Similarly, the techniques and methods I'm seeing in the industry, agile techniques, and I was talking to someone about DevOps yesterday, mean we need to behave in different ways. So what I saw in Ballarat yesterday, yes, I saw innovation around the kiosks for Qantas, around the work we're doing for the ATO. So what we're doing here is quite remarkable, but also how we're doing it. We're moving quicker, we can make drops every week, we can support consumer sentiment and change very quickly to pop out new features and capability. So I think that's a lesson for industry, IT and non-IT, is how do you understand the consumer and build systems for change? I won't go through all of these in the interest of time, but leading organisations get this phenomenon. They're moving from just cost flexibility and scale, so I want to save money on cheaper infrastructure, all the way through to I need to collaborate and change my business by working with different capabilities outside of my organisation. I'll take Netflix as an example. Netflix on any one night in the US account for about 29% of all internet traffic. So just Netflix alone, 29% by volume. That's obviously shaking up the television industry. People aren't watching cable, they're going to watch what they want, when they want on Netflix. Now, Netflix don't own a single server. They push all this through the cloud. They rely on another organisation, on experts to manage all this for them. Whether they've got one customer or 10 million, they don't have to worry. It scales up dynamically. They only pay for what they use. They've got a brilliant business model born in the cloud. Now, what Netflix quickly realised is, well, we've got this great platform. If we build an ecosystem around us, we can move much higher up the value chain. So Netflix are now working with the Sonys of this world. I bought a Blu-ray player and didn't realise that out the box, the APIs are embedded in there for Netflix. So immediately, I can get access to Netflix movies, and by Netflix embedding it in all these devices and all these different vendors' products, they've built an ecosystem to pull the consumer in. Netflix now is saying, well, hang on, we can get back to our core value. We don't need to worry about IT systems. Our core value can be actual programming. We remember what this was all about was the actual content, and they're creating original content, such as House of Cards, which you might have seen as a phenomenon, and really shaking up the business model. Now, I see this phenomenon happening across industries. So I will just close with an example. I've got an intern who's amazingly bright and does amazing things for me in the day, and I just found out she runs a shoe business in her spare time. She's fascinated by shoe design, and she's managed to get manufacturing in China to make her shoes. She's only 20. She's an amazing woman. But she did not want to create huge IT infrastructure. She had some success at the markets. Now she wanted to take these to a broader audience, I guess. Now, what she did was say, well, I need to build a website. I don't want to buy boxes, don't want to buy kit. She got a colleague, another student, to build this in the cloud, build a website, just access in the cloud. She didn't own anything. So she built and deployed her own website. With a bit of success, she stopped doing bank transfers and plugged into PayPal again, in the cloud, open APIs, built her ecosystem out. She can now take automated payments online. She wanted to learn what people were doing. She noticed people were buying in different places, different products. She can tap into cloud-based insights to actually analyze that data. She couldn't afford, like Tabcorp, couldn't afford to analyze 25% of their business on one day. She was even more disadvantaged. She can tap into insights in the cloud that tell her how her consumers are behaving. What it told her was they're buying on mobile. So if she can launch a mobile app, again, through the cloud, no infrastructure, she can use third-party developers in the cloud to deliver this. Remember, she is still focused on all she cares about is shoe design. She wants to design great shoes. She doesn't want to build websites, mobile apps, manage infrastructure, and that's still where she's at today. She's gone through understanding fluid, in terms of fluid retail, social commerce, selling through Facebook. So I can put my shoes on there and people can literally buy straight through. She's got shoppable videos, so as you're watching a video, you can click on that video if you like the shoes in that particular scene, and it pops up and allows you to buy them. And I'd expect to see that in all the movies Hollywood produce in 5 years' time. You'll be able to buy any item that you see in the movie. Interestingly, she can then tap into consumer sentiment. What do people actually want? What's trending in the Twitter sphere? Twitter open APIs in the cloud. If you can tap into that, you can understand, well, red shoes are trending. Red shoes are really starting to trend in Western Australia, and she can start to build them out of China. So using social insights plugged into her site, She's now tapping into that information and also telling people on her site these shoes are trending. And believe it or not, ratings and reviews on her site drive 50% more sales. 50% more sales. So you see, she's now beyond her garage. She keeps all the shoes in the garage that she gets from China. She's well and truly out of space. So far, she's got technology services in the cloud. Now she can tap into warehousing and logistics, completely outsource that business process as a service, have someone else manage it. She can have a business to compete with the David Jones, with any high street retailer, right, without investing in any infrastructure, in any development services, in any warehousing, in any supply chain. By collaborating through her ecosystem, she's built an entire business model that can compete with the giants. And this is the threat that I'm talking about. If you're a business and you don't invest in digital, this is what's going to happen to your business. It'll be taken up by some intern, a 20-year-old intern who just knows how to design great shoes and doesn't have to worry about how the hell they get to market. So I did want to close, and I know I've gone over, I do apologise, Mel. I did want to close with some lessons about how we see leaders doing this. It's not about what you're doing, it's also about the how. Leaders are taking a test and learn approach, which is anathema to most of the IT industry. We want to get it right first time and don't want to fail, right? We've got a bad enough reputation in IT as it is. But test and learn is paramount. Put a toe in the water, learn from that experience, learn what consumers want and respond to it. And I know that'll be, I'll see Mal looking around. I'm sure that's familiar in a research context and in a university context. From a simplicity point of view, start simple, reap those compounding benefits that we talked about, and grow this leadership position. If you get it right, you need to look at business model change. How do you build an ecosystem? What is your core model? If you're a retailer, think about what you're actually really good at. Is it creating an in-store experience? Is it about signing up exclusive deals with designers? Maybe you should focus on that and leave all of the digital experience to somebody else who knows what they're doing. This culture of innovation, I talk about culture, and I saw that in Ballarat yesterday. It's not just what we're doing it, but how we're doing it, taking different approaches to try things out, and fundamentally just doing it. Don't create the PowerPoint. I talked about, I wanted a mobile app developing internally in IBM. I said to the guys, go away and develop me a business case for investment. 6 days later, they came back, and I'm ready to review the PowerPoint, and they just show me the app. They just built it. Because that's how things work now. This idea of just doing it and getting on with it is my old school thinking is, well, where's the PowerPoint? In terms of speed, move with the cloud, experiment, particularly in mobile social analytics. It's really easy to tap into those capabilities. They were born in the cloud, easy to consume. Develop this ecosystem. If you're a business, think about who are fellow travelers on my journey? Who do I need to collaborate with? And that's, again, what we're seeing here in Ballarat every day. Use insights to engage individuals, not segments, and create that seamless customer experience. If you follow this guide, this is the key to, we believe, digital innovation. You can be that leader rather than the laggard financially by 2025. If you want to survive and prosper, these are some of the techniques that we believe you need to take on. So with that in mind, I did want to first apologise for going over time, Helen. And thanks everyone for your attention. I hope that wasn't too much of a ramble, but yeah, if we have got any time.
We've got time.
Good. I would open up to questions.
Actually, hearing all this actually made me think, is that being university at University of Ballarat, and how can we train our graduates to capitalize on this? Or do you think that we should train them the basic and allow the company to because this is a totally different way of thinking. It's not just a different technology. It's a different way of thinking. Yes.
I think you'd be surprised that I think your graduates will get it better than we do. So as per that example, Gen Yers and millennials get a really bad rap, right? They're just couch surfers and blah, blah, blah. That's not my experience of them. So I believe one in seven Gen Ys have set up their own business. It might only be a market store, some weird offshoot. They might just be DJing on the weekend, but they want to create and contribute. They get these kind of concepts. And I'm actually using our Gen Ys to teach me how we need to change and how we need to behave. I think there's a lot to be learned from that generation in terms of just doing it, that test and learn. I think they've had the benefit socially of security in the home. They've been fairly well looked after at home. They don't move out because our economy doesn't allow it. What that does is give them an amazing safety net to innovate and create themselves. And I've seen the way they use social technologies in particular and mobile is to create these new possibilities. I think we actually need to listen to them rather than teach them. They've got lots to teach us.
How limited do you think digital is? I mean, will we see it all the way to 2025, or are we perhaps already in the last stage of digital?
Honestly, I think we're just in complete baby steps. I think there's some really rudimentary things that we're doing now that will look naive by 2025, candidly. The way that, particularly in terms of using data to glean insights, it's really almost pathetic, some of the things we're doing. I mentioned I worked in military research, right? That was 1989 to 92, worked in military research. Now, military's great in that huge investment in research. Now, we were doing things that we could only dream of. I still haven't seen those inventions hit the mainstream market. So I mentioned that boring technology. The things we've already invented over the last 30 years have not yet become boring. We've got all that time to make them boring and commoditized and predominate, and still we're inventing a huge backlog of technology that will change and transform. So I think we'll look like cavemen. In 1,000 years' time, we will look like cavemen do to us now.
How do we convince the older generation to adopt this?
It's interesting. We were talking about this last night, right, Helen? I think the older generation, when they experience it, I think there's a fear factor, right, of getting into it. But once they do, they actually don't take much convincing, is my understanding, is my own experience actually from my parents and various others. There's a piece of research, it was only about 4 weeks ago, I was in Melbourne on my way to an event, opened the newspaper, and a Victorian piece of research on the over 65s, comparing those who had adopted technology versus those that hadn't, those that used the internet, had mobile devices and iPads. And what they actually found was not only were they able to use technology, but they were actually healthier. They were better connected to their community physically, not just through digital, but they collaborated more and worked in their community more. They were much more engaged in their community and lived like fuller lives, if you like. So that it's clear that there's a huge benefit to the ageing population. How do we do it? I'm not an expert in how we get access to that technology. All I know is that when we do, it doesn't actually take long to convince them. I mean, now that I mentioned technology getting boring, using an iPad is way more boring than messing around with internet connectivity on a Windows platform in the year 1992, right? Messing around with WinSock and trying to get access and your connection's dropping out, and it was way too interesting, right? Now it's getting so boring that toddlers, the toddlers, I had a toddler walk up to my TV, they wanted to change the channel and swipe it across. And you go, TV should do that. And I think now that interfaces have become so boring and intuitive and easy to use, I think that will lower the barrier to seniors actually using technology. That's what I'm seeing experientially anyway. I've got no research on that.
What about the generation below that, though? We're talking about managers now, the managers we're talking to now, trying to explain to them that this is happening and that there are things they should be doing.
Absolutely. Well, I see resistance every day in businesses in terms of, I can literally see when I'm talking to people about this stuff, people thinking, oh my God, I don't want to deal with this level of change. I've only got 4 years to go till retirement. I'm just going to ride it out, versus those that get it and engage and consume. Look, I think what we're trying to do internally, at least, is use this. I was saying to Professor Chan, almost use the juniors as reverse mentors. I go out I was saying before, I go out with a graduate at least once a week for a coffee, and it's they think I'm indulging them, right? In reality, it's indulging me. I learn a hell of a lot from them. If it's not the technology and change, it's the enthusiasm and the attitude. And so we're trying to encourage that kind of culture in IBM. We talked about flattening organisations and making them more agile. I think collaborating with different groups within the organisation, even in informal ways, can change that culture and change that attitude. But it is a big challenge. I think that resistance in middle management is a problem.
I find it interesting to see how e-commerce is transforming retail precincts, and it does sadden me at times when I walk Sturt Street and I see a number of vacant shops. I suspect e-commerce has got a lot to do with that. What looking out, looking forward, how do you see some of these retail precincts looking in 10 or 15 years' time? I mean,
Yeah, good question.
given that the small player, if they don't make the move, they're going to probably die in the vine.
I think we're already seeing changes in terms of bricks and mortar retailing and how they're responding to commerce. So, frankly, retail got pretty complacent. You know, just stack their goods up and people will come in and buy them, and then retailers complained when we were just looking at the price. Well, there's no experience in store. What do you expect us to worry about? You know, it's the same T-shirt. I'm going to look for the best price. I think digital has shaken them out of that complacency, if you like. What you're seeing particularly, it's changing here, but what you're seeing particularly in Europe and to some extent the US is a change of that in-store experience. So we're seeing much more physical digital integration. If you go in, for example, the Burberry store in the UK, Burberry have tried to create, this is an event, it's as much a nightclub as it is a retail store. People go in because they know on the hour, every hour, something will happen. They've got a huge waterfall in store, there's lights and sound shows every hour. Something will happen. It's not scheduled, you don't know what, something's going to happen. That gets people in. So I think creating an experience in store plus integrating it with the digital world. So the Burberry stores, all the tags are RFID enabled on the garments. You can walk up to, wear a suit and walk up to a terminal, walk up to a mirror that's RFID enabled, and it will embed the history of that garment, the provenance, the designer, how it's made. You can see video of the guy actually hand stitching the garment. So there's a whole in-store experience that you don't get digitally. And I think it's retailers understanding what's the advantage of bricks and mortar. There is actually a chance to create an experience, and you've seen that with the Apple stores. Those people in the Apple stores most of them aren't buying apples. It's a load of nerds like me hanging out because it's kind of a cool place. It's like a nightclub for geeks. It's really a sad environment, right? But and the amount of retailers I get, I was doing consulting for a TV franchise actually, who was trying to open up 100 retail outlets in Australia, and they literally said they were in a completely non-technology domain, but they said we want to be, I can't say the domain, but we want to be in our domain, the Apple store of our domain. We want to create the experience. They understand that even online will become commoditized. You've got to still, whether it's in-store or online, it is all about that immersive, collaborative experience. People want to be wowed, not just cheap goods at the cheapest price.
I've got two things. I just wondered that mobile first. You know, how I doubt many businesses in our region are thinking mobile first. You know, responsive design is something that businesses don't necessarily even know about, let alone have implemented yet.
Yep.
So how are you seeing organisations go mobile first?
Well, it's interesting in that the real businesses that are challenged are probably the ones that adopted mobile very early. And in particular the banks. I think the banks, they nailed online web, and then they thought, we'll put a toe in the water on mobile. So a lot of them created bespoke applications. So whether it's GoMoney or NetBank for Commonwealth Bank, that only accessed a certain segment of the market. They expected 1% adoption, and they've seen a massive explosion. So a lot of the banks are struggling with just the sheer engineering of servicing that. Absolutely. But you have seen banks, so there's the engineering aspect they're struggling with. And most of them now have 4 or 5 different applications, iPad, iPhone, Android, and they're struggling to get one single experience across them. So they are talking responsive design, that term. They are looking at responsive design, one single development platform on multiple devices. And you'll see later this year, one of the banks will deploy a whole new range of applications along that line. You've also seen Commonwealth Bank are a good example of that test and learn approach. They had their core banking application, resilient, it works, people like it, it's trusted. Well, how do you innovate on that platform? Well, we'll launch Kaching. So they launched another application, Kaching, innovative, new ways of approaching payments, peer-to-peer, even through Facebook. You can go into Facebook, because most people either pay a business or they pay a friend, right? Money between friends. If you go into Facebook and easily make a transfer to yourself. So you've seen businesses are understanding this concept of how do consumers actually use this technology and respond to it.
The second one is about Ballarat. You know, you've made some comments about the IBM team here, what you've seen, partnerships with the university. What should we be doing? We've got the National Broadband Network rolling out in our community right now, whether it's wireless or satellite or fibre. What's our opportunity?
Well, the opportunity is huge because, like I said, I mentioned that NBN lowers that barrier to entry, as does cloud, the ease of development of mobile apps. So the barriers are significantly lowered to anyone to innovate in this space. I think what I would say is, I see in these regional development centres like Ballarat, I saw amazing capability in the teams yesterday and amazing examples. I think what we're trying to do is say, and part of why I was here, is to say how do we replicate and generate real senses of competence in a particular domain. We've seen this with IBM's global delivery. We looked on our global delivery centres, so India, China, Egypt, Brazil, etc. I think The Economist just looked on that as a cheap resource pool, candidly, and you'll all have seen that economically. What we've actually learned is, well, hang on, we can develop, there's actually some sharp people out there. And our China Centre have done a couple of insurance system implementations. They're now insurance gurus. They understand the insurance industry, and we're creating these domains of knowledge. And I think that's the next step that we were talking about yesterday. It's okay, so we've done Maya online, DJs online, through Ballarat. Well, we know a lot about commerce. We can develop a commerce delivery centre here, a competency centre. Similarly for the ATO and the work we're doing there around, you saw millions and billions of transactions will pile through that thing. Well, the banks are also struggling with their payments network. There's repeatable solutions there. So I'm really interested in how Ballarat can become like an industry centre of competence or a technology domain centre of competence. The barriers are lowered. You've got the experience. It's about where do we focus? Where's Australia going, and how can Ballarat focus on contributing to that? Does that make sense?
I think it's very exciting.
Yeah.
Can you join me in thanking Will for his